So what we're going to talk about are user stories. We'll keep that as a surprise for the people who still didn't get it. So, who uses user stories today? Everyone. Why? They say it's working. So yeah, we're going to talk about them today. Hopefully we'll get you a few good tips of how I use user stories and how I think about them. This correlates very well with both Mark's and Fred's sessions before, which might give you better impetus to just fall asleep because you've heard the gist of it. So my name is GIL. I think it's my 6th time in Kiev, so it's kind of home away from home now. I'm an Agile coach, if you want to call it like that. People ask me, what do you do? I tell them I help people work better, usually on the technical side of testing and automation and coding and product, and even the team stuff. And today we're going to talk about user stories. So user stories, really, we had requirements before. How are they different? Before you fall asleep, answer the question. They're not prescriptive. Interesting. So like I'll give you something very vague and you'll know what to do with it. Better for discussion, which is very good. They are. So what can you tell me about this kind of story? It's wrong. No value, but why? Too generic. Actually, I think it's too specific, but... Is it a good story? No, why not? It doesn't describe the problem. It kind of describes why I want to do this. I want to make the payment. Granularity, so it's very small. Is small a bad thing? No, so it's a good thing. I'm going to confuse it until people are going to stop stepping in. Yeah, so if small is not that bad, why is that not good? It prescribes the solution. What is wrong about that? So they need to be creative and do things with unicorns instead of send buttons. Yeah. What is before that? It doesn't involve conversation? Okay. Why is? Ah. Plus, you can add that no right in his mind person would say, I would actually want to press a button. I don't want to press a button. And does he want to make the payment? Does he have a lot of money? So Kent Beck, Fred talked about him, and Mark also, so I'm going to talk about it. This is going to be Kent Beck's day. Hopefully the next 2 days are going to be like that. The original intent is that what you build is so amazing that users tell stories about how amazing it is. Do you remember about that amazing send button? It changed my life. What does it take to make users tell amazing stories about you? Ooh, you probably need an answer for that in an Agile conference. To solve their problem. In an amazing way, or in a simple way, that's okay too, but you solve their problems. Usually not by a button, but this is an alternative, this is an option as well. So we're going to talk about the things that make stories effective. we're going to talk about a bit about how to do slicing, things that I've learned that worked for me. Hopefully they will work for you. And some about story mapping. Who's done story mapping? Nice. I'm going to start at the top. We want to solve their problems, so we need to know who are they. So we call them user stories, but actually it's not just users. We call them stakeholders. And they come in all forms. Some of them sleep at the daytime. The fountain of knowledge called Wikipedia says stakeholders an individual, group, or organization who may be affected by, and very important, perceive itself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project. Okay? So we call them user stories, but they start at who are they. So they could be users, but they can also be customers. When are customers not users? Okay, I'll give you an example. Who uses Outlook? Who used Outlook before? I need to know we have a shared understanding of what we're talking about. I thought Outlook was this. Anyway, I use Outlook in an organization, and I used to have to switch passwords every 3 months. Yeah, people say. Do users say amazing stories about the way they change the password every 3 months? Which users actually asked for this feature? No users, but the customers, the people who are paying for that. And these are the IT people. And they're sold on the idea that if you change your password every 3 months, you're kind of secured. So they asked Microsoft to put that in, and we're suffering until today. So these are the stakeholders. And when we come to build something, we need to think about not just the users who are going to use the product, also about other people. The builders, we happy few. The people who build the software, we are stakeholders as well. We can decide whether it's going to be a send button, a send link, or voice activation, or something else. How we're going to build it, how it's going to look, will it work quickly or not? We're stakeholders as well. Regulators, people who are not using our software, but making sure that when people use our software, they remain alive and hopefully happy. Okay, so everybody's working in financial software, for example, medical stuff. People are watching over them, and they are stakeholders as well. So when we build the product, when we build the software, we need to take them into account as well. Finally, bystanders. These are people who are not related to the product completely. So who knows what Uber is? Wow, a lot of you are asleep right now. Okay. So Uber, right? The taxi thing. We don't have Uber in Israel. I come from Israel, by the way. Do you know why we don't have Uber in Israel? So why don't we have Uber in Israel? That's an alternative, but we don't have Uber. And there's a reason why we don't have Uber. You raise your hand. There's an alternative? No, that's not the idea. The taxi drivers have a very big lobby in the ruling party in Israel. So they pushed the government to not allow Uber in. So Uber as a product is affected by people who don't use it. They're not really innocent bystanders, I know. But when we build a product, we need to think about who's going to be affected by it. Okay? And what will happen if we do stuff to upset them, to make them happy, so on. So how do we work with stakeholders? We usually group them by roles, but what they're trying to achieve, jobs to be done. We need to think about what is important for them. And therefore, when we have this idea in our heads that these are the people we're going to serve, we're going to build better products and go down to the next level, which is goals. What are the goals? code? What are they trying to achieve? So, Wikipedia. A goal is a desired result that a person or a system envisions. I don't know how a system envisions, but plans and commits to achieve. When a system starts planning, I call it Skynet. But our stakeholders have goals. They want to achieve something. If our software creates a report, that's a nice thing, but somebody's going to use this report to do something, to convince people to do something, to make decisions about creating more reports. But they're trying to do something to get their jobs done, to make themselves happy, to do something. Usually we use words like better, faster, safer to describe what we're trying to achieve in this goal. We want safer payment. We can pay today, but it's not as safe, or it's not as secure, or it's not as easy to do. And we tell stories about what we're trying to achieve, we use these kind of words. Because usually we don't create something out of a vacuum. Okay, so we're trying to improve something, and they can do, or they cannot do completely something, which they will do after we can answer these goals. And sometimes we can't. The next thing going down is what we're going to put into our software, our product. These are capabilities. We sometimes call them features, but I'm going to talk about the distinction in a minute. As I say it, capability and ability to perform or achieve certain actions or outcomes, goals or outcomes, through a set of controllable and measurable faculties, features, functions, processes, or service. This is the vaguest of them all. But they allow them, the stakeholders, to achieve their goals. Okay? Our product will give them the capabilities to do that. How is that different than feature? Well, it has context. People, when I showed the user story earlier, and people say that, what happened before that? Where does it fit? We have context. Different stakeholders might use a feature capability in the system differently, and it might answer a different need. So these are features in context. Capabilities are really tied to the goals of the stakeholder. So basically, we can think about it much like Fred's triangle before, something like this. We start at the top. Good stories start at the top. We need to understand why we're building stuff, what are we trying to achieve, how to help them, what are we going to give them, and from there we go to stories. So what makes stories effective? So everybody here who was not asleep yet, I hope most of you are still not asleep, kind of mocked this format. Yeah. So why are we making fun of it? Is it helpful? Where is it helpful? Defines the roles of the system. The actor, the intent, and basically the how we're going to do this. So it's like a template, and a template helps us what? You jumped like 3 points. I'm not sure if the format itself does that. It really is easier to write. I'm not sure it's easier to understand, like everything that we talked about, but when you do, it made a great work. So yeah, it has the bits of information that we're interested in, hopefully. It's easier to write, but what it doesn't do? Has not? Quality attributes. Like nice. It's not as heavy as the requirements documents. That's true. It lacks context. A lot of the information that was missing, so what is this thing? It's too small. It's not there. Obviously, we can go back in time and go to the big requirement documents that we had before. Probably we don't want to do that. So Ron Jeffrey said, he's also a part of the XP originals and worked with Ken Beck, and he said this as an author of an Agile manifesto, as Ken Beck. I want that stupid story format to go away so that people can get to the essence of your user stories. So what is the essence of user stories? Notice I've done this. Okay, you're really asleep. I can continue and I can talk whatever I want. A user story is a ticket for conversation. They said it. It's very small, it's very short, and is a spark for conversation. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. Okay? If it starts to have all the contextual information that we might need to document as well, it's kind of losing its meaning. Because if we start writing these old documents and say, don't bother us, we'll just take this document of you and implement everything, we're losing the conversation. And we lose all the kind of things that you talked about, like other alternatives. Maybe we're going to do this cheaper. Maybe maybe we don't need to build this anyway. We need to build something else completely. The discussion gets lost. So obviously we're not when we're saying user stories, we're probably looking for something else. So what makes them effective? So a few tricks, whatever, that I use can actually help me understand and communicate better, because these, like I said, these are sparks for communication. Why are we doing this? Why are we building this? What is the goal? Who is the stakeholder? Connect it to someone. Not keep the feature like, we need a send button. No, how is it connected to a stakeholder? Consider dropping the template. I don't find it useful. I find it constricting, but it may work for you. Again, these are things that have worked for me. You can try it. Nobody will be mad at you, especially Ron Jeffries. Tell the story in a sentence or two. I'm trying to use more and more the sentence, try to explain this to a 5-year-old. It's hard in complex system with financial stuff, I know, but why would we build this? Who gets something out of what we're building? And if we're trying to keep it in an abstraction, in a sentence or two, we're conveying the main message of what we're building this. When we have this idea in our head, we can build something that is appropriate for that, hopefully, not build the wrong thing, and maybe find alternatives to how to write it. Anchor it. You kind of ruined it for me with the demo with the few people who raised their hand with the Uber thing, but I'm going to assume everybody does know what Uber is. So, you know, people in startups always say, it's like Uber, but for cave digging or something like that. Say it's like Uber, but for something else. Why is that? Yeah, but we may not know about cave digging, but we all know what Uber is. It creates the part of the shared understanding that you and I need to share in order to continue our conversation without me trying to explain every bit and little piece of details that you need that I want to convey. Okay? So anchoring means to focus on something that you already have. It's like a feature that we already have, but it's going to be like, instead of a login screen that takes you like 5 steps, it's going to be in 1 step. And once you know how your login screen works, I've explained it in a very short way by comparing it to something that we both know. Describe the demo. How does the demo look like? If you describe the demo, you'll see that you kind of you're visualizing the way of people using it. I'm going to go through the login screen through one screen, not just in 5. Makes sense? Why is that? I don't want to go through 5 screens. So let's take a scenario where we have, like Facebook, you have people who are new, people who are actual regular users, people who are regular users logging into the application directly, people who are new users are displayed with a sign-in dialog. Okay, makes sense? Everybody knows what Facebook is? Good. Look what I've done. I gave you a context. Everybody knows what Facebook is. I described the demo, okay, how we walk through. I created general rules. Most people are regular users. The exceptions are the new users, and they will see something different. So I went through a story, an actual story, which kind of set in your mind, this is the regular stuff, this is the exception. This is what the exception looks like. Okay, it's not like I'm going to send a button and then someone's going to ask, well, what happens if this failed? It's a separate story. Okay, but we can think about it as the main stuff which we need to focus on, make it robust, make it work, as long as we know that it's actually what we need, and the exception. It's kind of a balance between giving the context and keeping it short, right? 1 sentence, 2 sentences. But in the words that I use, they kind of convey the issue. With algorithms, it's kind of different. But we're talking about things that are working most of the time. None of these things actually work all of the time for everyone. If we're having a ticket for a conversation, we can start talking about this stuff. Which is more related to how we work and how much do we know about this problem that we're trying to achieve. Is it ready for work? Do we know enough about it? How complex is it? How big is it? How small it is? Do we need to do a proof of concept, some research beforehand? We can have this as part of the conversation. If it's big, do we need to split it? If it's too small, is it good enough? What alternatives do we have for implementation? What alternatives do we have for design? Which means, if this is the right problem, is this the way to solve it? Or do we have other alternatives? Is this the right problem? It's kind of late in the process to ask that, but we can always ask that. And the final thing, what will we learn? Okay? Assuming that we're building something that everybody agrees that this is the right thing to build, okay, but most of the time that's not the case. The case is that we think we're building the right thing. So what are we going to learn? Will this work? Are we going to build, is this the first step in learning a technology that will get us more later? We can think about what it will actually give us, and not just in terms of the product itself. But what we as a team can learn from this effort. Yeah, then that's a smart PO. Okay, so sometimes the stories are too big. We need a bit of slicing. What I'm going to show you today comes from my experience from working in the testing area. And who is a tester area? QA engineer? We saw that. Yay, do you know SF Depot? Wow, that's lucky for you that it came in. Okay, so first it says a slicing heuristic. What is a heuristic? Okay, a heuristic is a recipe that is not guaranteed to work. It works for some people some of the time. Okay? So SF Depot, which is kind of an acronym for these things, is usually a heuristic of how to think about test cases when you do test planning. Turns out it's really good about slicing stories as well. So what is SF Depot sales? Structure. How is the structure of our product tells us what we should build, how can we slice it. So for example, if I'm using a UI and API behind it, rather than just a monolith, it has an effect if we can do this thing or this thing first, the other thing later. Functionality, this is what we talked about until now. Different features, different capabilities can be separated. Data. It's accepting XML data, it's accepting text file, it's accepting voice activation, voice commands. Separate stories. We can deliver those, hopefully, in a way that is independent than the other ones. Okay? Interfaces, voice activation, user interface, calling an API, all these can be the same capabilities, but broken down into different deliverable methods. Platform, everybody knows that one, right? PC, mobile, iOS, works on my iPad. Each can be, for me, iOS is like a big thing, but it could be delivered separately. Operation, we talked about how a feature is part of a workflow. I think we did. Anyway, we might have the same thing, but part of a different operation, maybe for different kind of users, like administrator or a power user than a regular user. Same functionality, but produces different things. Okay? So an operation is a way to slice stories differently. The final one is time. Think about the Outlook thing, right? Every 3 months it needs a renewal of the password. So within these 3 months, we have a behavior that doesn't bother the user. In 3 months, it's going to have a very annoying pop-up saying you need to renew your password. Or the IT guy was going to after you with a hatchet. So different behaviors, different story that can be delivered separately. And obviously, this is just a starting point. You can think about these things in different ways, but it actually helps of thinking about what we're actually going to deliver and ask questions whether, is this what we're trying to achieve? Is this what we're trying to build? Is this what we're trying to build first? So there is going to be some slicing. Final thing I'm going to talk about is we have some way to create stories and how to do this. What's next? It's not just go and deliver. Some thinking about it. Story mapping, based on the work of Jeff Patton, which I'm going to show this the book in a minute. A technique that takes a user-centric perspective for generating a set of user stories. Okay, it's a bit vague, I agree. It's a very good book. User story mapping. It's not that long, and it tells you how to use basically visualization technique to reach shared understanding. Basically, that's what this whole talk is about. How do we have this shared understanding to build what we're trying to do together and understand? So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Some of them are kind of fuzzy. Sorry for the resolution, but I'll walk you through what you're seeing. From the top down, you see things, like capabilities that are, or operations that the user does in an Outlook thing. So we can organize mail or organize calendar, stuff like that. What is organize email? Create emails, put in folders. What is create email? Create from an open email, create a new one, and so on. Splitting stories, right? What you can do with this thing, first of all, you do it as a group together on a wall with everybody putting ideas. So you get an idea of what this whole thing means. Once you do this, you can give another attention and another consideration to what are we going to work on first. Turns out Outlook needs both an email and a calendar for the user. So it doesn't make sense to create just the email stuff and then release. We need some kind of operations in both. So I can move these sticky notes up and down between those black lines which signify releases. And with my people, with my team, I can create a shared understanding of this is what we're going to work first. And if these are the things that we're going to work first, if there are 3 teams or 30 teams, we need to coordinate of how to actually make sure that this goes out first. And if there's a discussion saying, well, this thing's too big, we can't do it, we need to slice more. It's very basic stuff that once we start talking, it actually works, but it's just there on the board. Here's another example. Only this time, it also has a significance of going from left to right, because this is a purchase order that goes through different users. It goes through the customer to the sales rep to the fulfillment vendor, and so on. It doesn't make sense to have a release without all these people touching it. So if something needs to go through different stakeholders, we can see that as well in here. And we can decide when something is ready to be shipped, at least in terms of planning. Again, the idea is to get some shared understanding of what's in there, what's in the product when we release it. And everything that we talked about until now, apart from shared understanding, all the questions that we talked about are still there, and it's easy to ask before we started implementing anything. What's the right way to do it? What will we learn? Is this the right order of things? Okay. So it was before I even got to the 10-minute thing. Okay, so what did we talk about? We talked about starting at the top, thinking about our stories not as things to implement or test, rather than how do they fit the big picture of who are we trying to solve the problems, what are their goals, do we know them enough? Who's in charge of this thing, usually? Defining who are the stakeholders, well, product owner. Is that the right answer? Management is the wrong answer for almost everything. It's the team. The only way the team can build the mostly right product or right different things they can play with and learn from is the team. No one person can do that. That's a very big gamble. Okay? So one of the original ideas of what a product owner should do is bring customers so the team can talk with them. Not just one person goes out. Not just the PO goes out, talks to the user, and brings in the user's voice while the developers and testers are playing with their IDs. No, the team builds something that they understand that is better, and they know that by talking directly to customers. So we need to know who we're building the software or product for. We need to understand what we're solving, and then we can write or communicate what the stories are. We can slice them better with all kinds of way of looking at different perspectives and come to a conclusion of what we're going to build and why we're going to build it and what we're going to achieve by that using story mapping and slicing. Now, I hope someday some users will tell amazing stories about how you solve their problems. And you can tell them, yes, it all started with GIL's idea of having a talk at Kiev. Actually, it was Ron Jeffries, but yeah, and Ken Beck's. But really think about how people are using your software, understand why you're building this stuff. Otherwise, stories will not be that amazing. Thank you very much. Here.
Do you know any good alternatives to user stories approach?
It's on, okay. The question was, do I know alternatives to user stories? Whatever works for you, really. The basis here is that everybody's working on this, understands mostly the same thing. So it's not the formats, it's not the specs that are like 5 pages long, but it might be if it works for you. I used to work with my team with just sticky notes with three words on them. Like consider you're part of the test team and you have bug numbers.
How do you verify them?
The bug numbers?
Yeah, these 3 words in the stories.
I communicate all the time. When I can do that, it works. When you're part of a team that is part of a 3-team project that everybody works together, it's harder because a lot of people, it's hard to communicate and align all of them in order for them to have the same understanding everywhere. We do that all with the supporting processes. Some of them we discussed here. Some of them there was the session before that, the big planning thing that aligns people whether we're going to talk about these things but not other things. So you do all kinds of things. It doesn't come down to whether the story is written this way or that way, so people will understand it or not. There's a whole process and team work around this.
Okay, and as addition, how to solve the problem when we try to make requirements from user stories? Or should we do requirements from user stories?
It depends on what is your definition and the difference between requirement and user stories. You need enough information to understand what to do, what to solve, hopefully, sometimes how to do it. If it's enough, go ahead and do it. You might be wrong. You might find out that you did it the wrong way or it's not useful, but that's the start of work. You'll never know everything. It's like Fred talked about the fuzzy things. You never know. But once you discuss and you have a shared understanding of what you're doing and why, and how it connects to the final user / customer / stakeholder, the alignment is better. Chances are you are less wrong than you will be without it, just reading something from Jira. Who works with Jira? I feel sorry for you. Yes, next question.
Thanks for the talk at first. What's your experience with user stories with microservices?
Ooh. It's a bad experience from what I had, but it's mostly because what I worked with, the teams I worked with were not user-centric. Meaning the microservices had to take something from here and put it here, which is not interesting because it doesn't have the context of who is the stakeholder, what are we doing, which part of the workflow is it doing. So it's not that I can blame the user story for being not written well or not used well, but again, it's more of a complex system of why are we building this? Is this right architecture? And therefore, if this is really the right architecture, what is the context of this microservice? What is where does it start? What does it end? And then once we understand each other, it really doesn't matter what story is, because we're going to have an understanding of what it's going to do. So it's not really architecture related.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you for speech. And my question is how to maintain the optimal size of user story, because it's a very painful question when you talk with developer and he said that I can do it in 39 story points or something like that. I need one task, I need one user story, and I'll do microservice, the whole, in one story.
When you're saying I, what are you in this story?
Product owner.
Oh, product owner, okay. So as a product owner, you want to get something working.
Yeah.
Okay? So it doesn't matter, it's binary. It's either working the way you think or not. So story points don't matter, units don't matter, it doesn't matter. Is it working or is it not working? Okay? So I, as a developer, might tell you, yes, it will take you 39 story points or 2.5 weeks. Okay, and you have to decide what you do with it. You can say, I can't wait for 2.5 weeks. Or you can say, okay, we're going to release in 3 months. It doesn't matter the scale of things as long as you and I both understand what's the impact here. So for example, I can't wait for 2.5 weeks. Why is that? Because there's Christmas coming and I have to put it out before Christmas. After that, it will be Christmas, and there's not much point of releasing that after Christmas. Then I can make a hack, and maybe you'll have something in a week and a half. You get half a feature. Is that okay? You can decide. Again, it's a trigger for conversation. Okay, we can call it negotiations, but basically it's a conversation, because at the end we'll both know what we're working for. Again, your motive of I need it before 2.5 weeks is very important for the developers to know. Otherwise, why would they do it? How can I switch time to have instead of this? I can't do that. But if I understand your motives, I can do something else, offer alternatives. So it's not about negotiating how long it takes, because usually we know that we're talking about people who are doing the work know the best how long it will take. And they don't, but they know the best, they have the best estimates, right? That's because we can estimate as well. You can take this information, do whatever you can with it. If it's not fitting into your plane, we need to find some way to do this. Again, going back to what we're trying to achieve here. We have users waiting for their Christmas hats, and they need it by Christmas.
But is it right to agree with one user story
With the
and
developers?
don't slice it? Like the whole user story which describe whole functionality.
What you and I call slicing,
Yeah.
which is a technical term of taking one thing and separating into three things, basically translates to what you get at the end working. Okay? Is it worth it? It might be worth for you to get like a third of a feature. It might be. I don't know, but you're the product owner. I can tell you, this is what I can give you. It might cost you later, but you might be willing to pay for it now. Okay? So it's a decision of whether what you can get, and does it fulfill what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you for question.
That's it.
And
So I'm going to be here until all day tomorrow and today. So if you have like any stories to tell me, amazing stories, come in and let me. And if you have any questions as well. Thank you very much for coming.